So we have our medical nugget for today, something for you guys to think about. What is the leading cause of dry skin in America? All right, we got fall coming, winter, it's getting cold, so dry skin problems. What is the leading cause of dry skin in America? Who knows? No, technically, but no. Who knows? Not drinking enough water? All right, very good. Heat and cold. That is not true. Close. That's got to be like number 2 and number 4. What's number 1? Number 1 cause. What is the leading cause of dry skin in America? Ian? No, sorry. It is towels. 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 You know, like a bathroom towel? Yeah. You know how when you get out of a shower and you towel off? Ian, can you explain to your dad? Thanks. That's towels. Leading cause of dry skin in America is towels. There you go. I didn't say anything was wrong with them. I just said it was the leading cause. Poor Chuck. You want to explain to your dad just a little bit? All right. So let's go to the Lord in prayer for Chuck, and then we'll start class. All right, dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us, Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to study from your word this morning. Pray that you'd guide and direct in everything that's said and done and all the different classes that we've got, Lord. And we just pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so we are in Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4. Picking up there. So one of the things I like to do is keep you on your toes a little bit, right? So now you're all thinking, well, what's the joke? Ha! Right, so there you go. So that's a question hopefully we're going to look at a little bit today is why didn't God kill Cain for his sacrifice? And the reason I ask you this question is we talked last week about Cain's sacrifice and how we've often been taught that God didn't accept Cain's offering because it wasn't a blood sacrifice, right? There's a symbolic sacrifice that we get information from later on, right? We, however, don't know the exact requirements, details behind the sacrifice that was asked of Cain and Abel at this time. It just said, in verse 4, 3, and in the process of time it came to pass that they brought an offering, right? So let's take a look actually at chapter 4, verses 3 through 7. And it says, in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. All right. There are offerings that are in Leviticus. Obviously, it's later on that we get more detail about. We have the sin offerings, similar to what Abel brought. But there are also drink and, ironically, meat offerings that actually have no meat in them. Grain sacrifices, drink offerings, those types of things that are also brought unto the Lord. Okay, so the offering that Cain brought isn't, at least from the details that we have in Leviticus, and the lack of details we have in Genesis, is not inherently wrong. We can't, well, he totally brought the wrong thing. He should have known better. We don't know that, okay? We just know that they were supposed to bring something at that time, all right? But if you go back and you look at, jump forward. If you jump forward and think about Nadab and Abihu, right? What happened to them? Yeah, they brought strange fire before the Lord, right? Where did they get their censers from? Nadab and Abihu, they brought censers, little smoking incensey things, right? Anybody who's been in a Catholic church knows what a censer is, right? Where'd they get them from? Oh, nobody knows. The temple. They were made for the temple, right? They were designed to be used in the temple. Okay, so it's an actual part of the service that they're supposed to have. But what did they do? Either the mix was wrong, or because there was a specific incense that the Lord wanted. So if they just throw anything in there they want and go out there running out praising the Lord with whatever that was, well, God wasn't pleased with that, right? And they got smitten right away for a wrong sacrifice, all right? We think about Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, right? What happened to them? They were killed too. Part of the reason why they were killed is? How so? What were they doing? They were with women. True. Think about the sacrifices, though. What were they doing to the sacrifices? Right? They were also taking portions that they weren't supposed to take. Right? They were changing the way the sacrifice was supposed to be given. And God's like, no. You don't mess around with my sacrifices. And they got killed for that. Okay, so then why didn't God kill Cain? Just something to think about there, all right? Let's see. Verse 4, we talked about this last week. Wife, you want to read verse 4? All right, so we talked about this last week where there were firstlings. And how Chuck pointed out that flock, you get the one for the year, typically, right? So it is a sacrifice. It is a dent in your livelihood, right? Because now you don't have that offspring anymore. You're not building up your flock anymore. That is a huge cost to you, all right? Chuck?
You have to have in your mind when you do something like that you're not dependent on that firstling. You're dependent on God who gave it.
Right.
So you're willing to, in other words, rest in Him, not in your own devices.
Right. Okay?
That's a hard
It
issue.
is. Oh, hang on to that, right? One of the also things that's mentioned is that it's supposed to be first, right? What do we know about the offering that Cain brought in verse 3? What does it say? Go ahead and read that verse for us. What does it say?
Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord.
Okay, so what is that?
Fruit of the ground, I guess the ground is cursed, so.
Well, animals are cursed too.
True.
What does that mean to you, fruit of the ground? Ian, what does that mean to you?
Probably, anything that grows from the ground, like seeds, wheat, whatever,
Darlene, what does fruit of the ground mean to you?
It means my garden.
Sigh. My garden.
It's done for the year.
Right? What? Rick, what do you think fruit of the ground means? Sheep aren't edible. Okay. Sandy, fruit of the ground. Chuck?
I used to think, and I'm just.
I used to think too, Chuck.
I don't know what, yeah, I gave up on that. Tilling the ground seems more labor intensive to me
Uh-huh.
than shepherding a flock. It seems like God is more or less giving you that flock and produce from it. But see, that's why I don't think that anymore, because really, if you're a farmer and you're growing crops rather than livestock, you're dependent on God every way through. Everything you got.
Right?
comes from Him.
You got to have rain, right? Where does that come from? All right? You got to have rain. Where does that come from? You didn't do that yourself. All right? Valerie, what do you think? Fruit of the ground. What does that mean to you? Oh, that's horrible. Right? No wonder there was no respect. Right? Right? It's a, I don't know. I find this phrasing, and maybe it's just me, I find that phrasing, fruit of the ground, just weird. Picture of what?
Well, a child is born, lamb slain from the foundation of the earth. They weren't aware of what exactly was coming, but the ground doesn't have a womb.
Right.
And so it might be key to a blood sacrifice, right? And I don't know if God told them all that, because we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. Right. Okay. To me, personally, I find the phrasing weird just because of, well, like for Abel's sacrifice, it's definitely firstlings, right? He brought, it specifically, it was the first one. And we know in Leviticus that that's what they were supposed to bring. They were supposed to bring the firstlings of the flock. But they were also supposed to bring of the first fruits of their crop, right? Let's see. If we look at, we got firstlings of the goats and of the sheep, and first fruits of the ground, of course, which I did not write down because that would have been helpful, right? But his offering, there's no first mentioned, right? There's no first mentioned. It just is. So where did he get it from? Right? Is it fresh, picked from the tree, from the vine, dug out of the ground, and then given? It gives the significance. Actually, it gives that there is no significance. Right? It's just he brought stuff. Right? But what does God want? He wants your best. He wants your first. Right? What did Cain bring?
Whatever.
Stuff.
What he had stored.
It could be.
Just like us with a bank account. Do I have God?
Right. It could be what was stored. It could just be stuff. Rick, do you ever take apples off the ground? You use them? Well, yeah, if they're good, right? Okay, so what did Cain bring? We don't know, right? He could have got stuff. Well, if I shine it, that's good enough. God will take it, right? It's an offering. What's he going to care, right? Right? How many times do we do that with God? Right? We just give him, God will be happy with it. I gave him anything, right? Okay. So there's no special significance. And it could just be, like was mentioned, out of what was stored being just out of bounty. Right? He goes to his storeroom, grabs a crate of apples or whatever, who knows, and takes it down there. Is that what God wanted? Is that how God wants the sacrifice to be? No. Right? Okay. We are allowed to bring offerings, yes. Does God want of our bounty? Yeah, we can bring an offering to God. You know, you've got big bank accounts. If you take $1,000 out of there and just throw it in an offering plate, God is not going to be mad with that. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't your first 1,000. I can't take it, right? But there's a difference. There's a difference between the sacrifices that, like you see in Leviticus, that are made for sin offerings or drink offerings or, trespass. They all have these different offerings. They all have a different purpose. They all have a different significance. They all have different requirements, right? But then there are times where you can just straight up give a bounty, right? How many times did we see where, let's see, like when they were supposed to bring food and things for the Levites, right? Stuff like that. Or when the tabernacle was being created, right? What was needed for the tabernacle? You need wood and skin and fabric and all this stuff, right? And what did they bring? They brought stuff of their bounty for the Lord, right? There was no, that wasn't your first gold bar. We can't take it. There was none of that. So there is a time and a place where you can just straight up bring of your bounty and bring it in, all right? So we're not totally given details on the sacrifice itself, but what we are given details about is the heart or the attitude of the men, right? If you take a look at 1 John. 1 John chapter 3. 1 John chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. Ian, you got that? All right. Chuck, you got that? All right, you want to hit it?
In this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of God, neither he that loveth not his brother. For this is the message that ye heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous.
Okay, so here in 1 John 3, there is a distinction made. There are two sides, right? There's two sides. What are the two sides? Okay. There's righteous and there's evil. What else? There's distinctions that are made in these verses. What are they? Okay. From the hallway. All right. So you got righteous on one side, evil on the other side, God on one side, devil on the other side. What else? Think back to who we're talking about in Genesis. We have Cain on one side. Which side is Cain on? Evil, right? And we have Abel on the other side. So here in 1 John, how is God describing Cain? His works were evil. What else? He's wicked, right? He's of the wicked one. So now, does wickedness come across in anything that we do? Or is it something that we can hide and nobody knows that we're wicked? You can hide your wickedness, and it just shows up whenever. Well, you got to pick a side. We try and hide it. But, okay, Chuck, you've got kids. Can you tell when your kids have done wrong? Okay, good. Not always. Not always. That is a good point.
You have 3 kids, I'll tell you a different story. One of them's fine, but they all say it's not them.
Yeah, that's true. Couldn't have been me. Yeah. Well, you know it's one of them. Nail them all, right? But, okay, you don't know which one, but technically then they're all covering. So they're all lying. Interesting. Chuck? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's good. Oh, yeah, right? There you go. Be sure your sin.
What I was going to say originally, Eric, was that whatsoever's not of faith is sin. And I think that's the distinction. One's relying on God,
Mm-hmm.
one's not. And we're talking back to the heart issue. When God came to Cain, he could have repented.
Yep.
If he had a contrite heart, God won't reject that.
Right. Don't get too far ahead of me, Chuck. Distinction that's made. Cain is put on one side. His works were evil, and Abel's were righteous. Proverbs 18:2. Proverbs 18:2. Now you got it, Ian? There you go.
A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself.
All right, so there's an interesting thing here is that the heart may discover itself, right? How many of you have ever heard that, college, right? Especially after high school, college students, they need to discover themselves. They need to find out themselves, find out who they are, right? What does this verse tell us about that? What type of person does that? Right? A fool does that, right? On which side would a fool be on? An evil side or a righteous side? Right? So as we're talking about the heart, right, there's a difference in the heart. There's a difference in the attitude between Cain and between Abel. All right? That we can tell for sure. Look at Jude. Jude chapter 1. There only is one chapter, but you know what I mean. Otherwise, you'll be looking for Jude chapter 11, and it's not here. Right? Jude, verse 11. Dennis, you got that? Yes, 11. All right, so what does this verse tell us about Cain? Okay, so there's greed there. What else? Chuck? Okay. How would you sum that up, though? How does this verse sum it up? What does this verse tell us about Cain? Well, he did perish. What else? Selfish. Okay, what else? This greed, this selfishness is described how? Error. Okay, he wants a reward. What else? Idolatry. Okay. What else? Remember, we're looking at two different sides here. Right? We're looking at two different sides. We have Abel on one side, we have Cain on the other side. We have Cain's wickedness, we have his selfishness, his idolatry, his greed. How is that summed up in one three-letter word that starts with W in this verse? Is that in there? Okay, that's good too. Right? All of this, there's another three-letter word that starts with W that comes before the woe, though. There's a way. All this is a way. Right? This is his path. This is the way he's going. The path that he's on. And where does this path lead? Now the other woe. The other W. I'll just give the answer. Right? It's woe. Right? So Cain is described as having, which goes back to our question before, is can you tell? Right? There's a path that they're on. So this path that he's on, this greed and this selfishness, is it going to show up in his sacrifice? And like Dexter said, yes. Right? Is he going to give the best that he's got? No. Right, it doesn't matter to him. Well, he wants the best. Right, it doesn't matter what he's going to. Well, God's not going to know. We're just going to offer it, and you can take it if he wants. Right? So it's going to come across in the sacrifice. What type of giver does the Lord want? Right? A cheerful giver. Right? Is that any of this? Is that part of Cain's way? No. Whose way would that be? Abel's, the other side, right? Right? The Lord wants a cheerful giver. So when we put in the offering plate, does our attitude matter? It totally matters. Right? It totally matters. Okay? Ties to greed, first fruits. All right. Let's see. Proverbs 13:10. We should all know this verse, right? Proverbs 13:10. Says what, Shirley? All right. So only by pride cometh contention. So in these two sacrifices that we looked at in Genesis chapter 4, is there contention in any of them? Is there contention on either side? Yes, there is. Right? Because what happens when Cain gives his sacrifice? What happens? What does God do? He doesn't accept it. Right? And then he talks to Cain about it. So Cain then has a choice to make. Well, what are you going to do about it? Right? Okay. What ends up happening? What snowballs for Cain? We don't remember the story of Cain and Abel? Why would you become wroth? Right? So there's our contention. Right? Right. Okay, so you can tell then by his anger, by his way, right, that now he's got contention, but the root then, because of that contention that shows up, we know he has what? We know he has pride. Right? So there's a pile that is growing on Cain's side of things that aren't good for Cain. Right? Which, as he goes down his path, as he goes down his way, it leads to more woe for him. Right? Because then he'll get kicked out, he gets the mark put on him, he gets banished, and he's got to go over there someplace. Right? Let's see. Jeremiah 17:9 tells us what? Dexter, you know Jeremiah 17:9. What's that tell us? Oh, all right, so here's our heart in the middle, right? And it's, what is it? How is it described? Okay, it's wicked. Right? So that's our way of Cain there. What else? It's deceitful. What does that mean? Can't trust it. Why not? It lies to you. Your own heart lies to you. How messed up is that? It's your heart, and it lies to you. How does it lie to you? Specifically in the verse, what does it say? Say it out loud, Rick. What does that mean, desperately? What does that mean? He'll do anything he can to get it. That's your heart. Your heart is desperately will do whatever it takes in order to sin. Right? Kids, when they get busted, they will do anything it takes, right, to get out of that punishment. No, it wasn't me. The evidence is all over your face. How could that possibly be? No, my brother put it on my face. He held me down, right? That's how desperate, and the lies get worse and stupider, right? And as adults, we just are the same exact way, right? We get better at hiding it sometimes, right? Not you specifically, but going back to your point. We're just condemning Valerie over here, sorry. Right? The things that the little kids do in Tiny Tots, adults do the exact same thing. We're just bigger versions. We're better at sometimes, right? Other times we just get more bold about it and we don't care anymore, right? Right? Those that ride in the daytime, as the Bible describes. All right? We are desperately wicked. In our hearts is no good thing. So we definitely have a pattern there. If we look at Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. Right? But yet we're told, the world tells us that we should follow our heart, right? Follow your dreams. Go find yourself. Discover yourself. Let your feelings guide you. Oh, wow. Where does that get us? What path does that take us down? Yeah, there you go. You end up killing your brother. Very good. All right, Hebrews 11, verse 4. Mark, you got that?
By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh.
All right, very good. So what do we know about Abel's sacrifice? How is it classified? More excellent, right? Okay. Why? Faith, okay? Okay. So now, what does this verse tell us, outside of his offering being excellent, what does it tell us about Abel and his sacrifice? What does the combination tell us? Okay, right? It says in there it obtained witness, right? That Abel was righteous. So, much how we laid out for Cain, how he has a path, and how those things in his heart show up in the things that he does, right? The same thing happens on the other side for Abel. His righteousness comes out in his sacrifice. It does not say that his sacrifice, where'd it go? 11 verse 4. It does not say that his sacrifice was righteous. Right? It says that Abel was righteous. And therefore his sacrifice showed that. See the difference? All right, very good. Okay. So Abel obtained witness of his righteousness. He did not obtain righteousness by his sacrifice. This is the difference. One is showing what is already there because of faith, right? How do we get faith? You take a leap. How do you get faith? How does faith come? Oh, right? Faith cometh by hearing. Right? So, if Abel, by faith, offered unto the Lord, right? Offered unto God, it says there. But he offered unto the Lord. How does that happen? What does that mean?
God, not to his heart.
Very good, right? There is listening. Mm-hmm. Right, very good. And over here, Abel is listening to what God has to say. But not only is he listening, think James, what's happening? He's becoming a doer, a doinger. Right? Okay. Very good. All right. So, what is Cain not doing? What is Cain not doing? If we look back at Genesis chapter 4, right? What is Cain not doing? Because look at the end where we talk about when Cain's off, his countenance fell. 6. And the Lord said unto Cain, right? The Lord's talking to Cain. Ignoring the Lord. So those of us who have any type of life experience, what happens when we ignore the Lord? Dexter? We end up in this woe mess over here, don't we? Right? Those of us who have kids, what happens when your kids don't listen to you? Does it go well for them? No, not at all. Right? Okay? That's woe for them. Right? Kids are often a too good example of the relationship between us and God. Right? If we pay attention to that. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 8. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 8. Wife, you got that?
Sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight.
Okay, so what does this tell us? No. But why? Because he was wicked, right? Is the sacrifice itself wicked? No. Okay? So even, think about this. We have to have we saw from like Nadab and Abihu, right? You have the wrong sacrifice, but theoretically the right attitude. Wrong sacrifice, right attitude, but what happened? They got smit, right? If you have the right offering and the wrong attitude, what happens? It's wicked, right? It's an abomination. God does not want it. What does God want? And? Right? No, right attitude and the right sacrifice. They both have to be there. If one of them is not there, it's wrong. Okay. Go ahead.
So the fruit of the ground, I mean, God wasn't saying that sacrifice was wrong. He's just saying Cain's heart was wrong.
What we can prove is that Cain's heart was wrong. We are not given details about the sacrifice. We only know that they had to bring one. Okay? The details in Genesis are not there. we want to infer and take things from Leviticus that happens hundreds of years later and push that down into these sacrifices and see how they match. That may not necessarily be the case. It could be, in which case he's got a wrong sacrifice and a wrong attitude, and he's still done for, right? But what the Bible does tell us is about Cain's way, his heart, his attitude, versus Abel's. That we can prove. And that's what we have to go with. Not that we can prove, right? So there's the thing. In the way I like to do my classes is, what can I prove, right? You can infer that his sacrifice was wrong, and it could be. We don't have the details. We read through Genesis. It just says in the process of time you're supposed to bring a sacrifice. Well, how'd they know that? We don't have that information. But what we can prove, but what we're told about Abel, that we can prove. All right? So that's that. I got to hit Valerie first because she had her hand up.
You referenced a verse, and I'm forgetting what it was. It was verse 4 and anyway, it says, his sacrifice, and I noticed that for Cain and Abel, it does say his flock for Abel, but for the fruit of the ground, it's not his crop even. It's the fruit of the ground. And we don't know if he even, I mean.
He just went off to some other field somewhere and took that?
When I was a kid, I used to chop off
Sure.
grass for my rabbits. And I never worked the ground for that grass. It was the fruit of the ground as opposed to our garden.
Yeah, you're looking at Genesis chapter 4, verse 4. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock. And in verse 3, it says, Cain brought of the fruit of the ground. Just straight up fruit. So yeah, he could have gone over into that field over there, got his stuff, and gave that to the Lord, and he lost absolutely nothing, right, out of what he had. Okay, Randy?
I noticed that God still spoke to Cain after a bit.
God did still speak to Cain.
You know, so where was the love in Abel, Cain, and where was the love in Cain? Was there anything good about Cain? He gave something to the Lord. Was there anything good about him?
Okay. So let's go with the first. The first statement was that God still spoke to Cain even after he messed up. But think about it. What's the verse? James chapter 1. James chapter 1. Chapter 1, verses 14 and 15? Sure, James chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Okay, so we can take a look at Cain's actions, God's interaction with Cain, and the verse in James where there's a lust, there's a temptation, there's something going on with Cain, with his sacrifice, but it is not yet fully manifested itself into sin yet. Because you can tell that from God's conversation with Cain in Genesis 4, and he's like, look, get your act right, and then we're not going to have a problem. So he has that choice then. Now, do I listen to God or don't I? I have a choice to make. And he goes off all mad and wrothy, right? Okay, so, but yes, it is nice that God talks to us even after we've screwed up, right? So there's the love, the mercy of God, because he still wants that fellowship with us. He still wants to bring us back. But at some point, yes, he gives us an opportunity to change, right? He did the same thing with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve messed up in the garden, and he's like, Adam, where you at? You know, what's going on, Adam? What'd you do? Right? So he's still talking even after, he still talks to you after you screw up. Right? Okay? So that was part one of Randy's question. Part two then is, was there any good thing in Cain? You'd have to ask at what point? Right? In the beginning, was there? You have a choice. But as you go down that path, right, it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. Think of Romans chapter 1, right? There's a path in Romans. Once you ignore God, once you don't want to acknowledge God, the way goes sideways for you until you're done. You don't even get a chance to come back, right? Yeah. Yeah, and she was hoping at that point that he was going to be the one who would end all this sin and Satan stuff. She was looking for that quick fix, which also never happens. Right? So he had the opportunity to do good. He didn't take advantage of it. Even at that point when in Genesis 4 where God's talking to him, he has that opportunity to turn from this and come the other way, and he did not want it. 49.
Sometimes God just won't give you another chance. You're supposed to kind of both things. You'll never be too late. God will always give you that last chance, like on the cross when the thief was right next to Jesus. The phrasing that God will always give you another chance is, but it's erroneous, right? You have the opportunity. You're the one that left. So it's not that God's giving you a chance. You're the one that's rejecting the chances, right? It goes along with, how could a loving God send somebody to hell, right? Well, God didn't send anyone to hell. You chose to go there, right? God presented you with a free gift. You didn't accept it. That's not on him, that's on you. Right? So there's a difference there. There is an opportunity that we have to turn back towards God, depending on where we are in our path. But if you take a look at Romans chapter 1, there's a time where it goes in there and God goes, you know what? You're not going to change. And he says, see ya, and lets you go. Right? And we talked about last week how your name, at the point of salvation, your name is not written into the book of life. Right? Your name is already there. When you're conceived, your name is there. You get blotted out. Because God knows, because God is omniscient, there is going to be a point where that dude is never going to turn. Because he knows the beginning to the end. Right? So he's going to go, you know what? Erase him. He's done. Right? In our finiteness, we think, well, God's not giving me another chance anymore. No, you've crossed your line that you're never going to turn around. Your heart is hardened. Think Pharaoh. Chuck.
You can think that in your mind that he's not giving you another chance. You have a chance yet.
Yeah.
You're thinking about that dilemma.
Yeah.
But there's a sort of a thread that runs through the Bible we're all familiar with, where the wicked get caught in their own snare.
Yep.
And when the Bible
Entangled.
says that we're given over to a reprobate mind or strong delusion.
Yep.
Those are the things that are waiting for us.
Yep.
We go to them. God doesn't necessarily place them on us.
Yeah,
We're
that's exactly.
prone to them because of our wicked hearts.
That's exactly it. Right? Yeah. It goes along with the salvation thing. That is what you are choosing. Right? But we like to blame God for stuff. Evan, 30 seconds.
With Cain, he definitely had, God gave him the opportunity to, repent.
Oh, yeah.
But when you think about 1 Samuel 15:22, Samuel said, "Hath the Lord his great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord?
Yeah.
For behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. God intended you to obey and to listen to him.
Yep.
He never intended for sacrifices to be there in the first place, but it was there because of sin.
Yep.
And
That they chose to do.
yep.
Right? It's all choices on us. Right? All right, that concludes our epic adventure through God's Word today. We have to wrap it up. You are dismissed. Have a wonderful day.